welcome. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. Welcome to Bridges Live Presents Mental Health Mondays. But today's a special day, mental health with education. And a lot of people don't understand the association of mental health and our education when it comes to Black education. Or I miss education, I like to have always said for a long time. And I want people to get their notebooks. I know you can get this on all your podcasts. Thank you for everyone who watches on all your podcast channels. You can get on your iHeart, Apple, and everywhere you get your podcast channels. You can catch it on your live on your YouTube and all those little streaming devices you got. But here's the kicker, people. You know, every time I do mental health, I talking about the cells, the dynamics, the neuroscience of health, and how we are misfunctioning in our bodies on a chemical level. But here's the kicker. We are trying to move forward in a new paradigm in the last 60 years, since 1945, since we had that big summit in Africa, that we are trying to move forward in a new Black consciousness. And yet there's still some sleepy people out there. Now, chemically, I understand why, because you're blocked by trauma. You're blocked by, oh, woe is me, why is me, and how come is me. Well, and we keep trying to get you past that so we can get you on this side to move forward. I have an esteemed colleague, Mr. Robert Johnson, and a Dr. Faheem Judah L. Now, I want to go right to Robert, and let's talk about the education in the school systems that is being misaligned with our black and brown children, that we can't seem to get into this new consciousness of who we are.
Absolutely. That's an important point, and it's an extremely important role in our community, which the education system plays. One, it's extremely important that this is an opportunity for us to reshape the landscape of instruction right now. It has been proven that the current model does not work for our students in our communities, right? And there are many reasons why, but just to name a few, if you look at the K-12 system, it typically is it teaches individuals to enhance their rote memory and to be able to engage in a consumer concept, not to be innovative and creative, right? So it's already shutting down some of the sensories and some of the talent in some of our youth, right? And in fact, the best instructors in the classroom, they know how to do what? They know how to connect the lesson plan to real life experiences. And that brings forward creativity and innovation within students. But if you think about what's happening right now, individuals are preparing the next wave of education looking at a global landscape. We are stuck in a communal landscape and a national landscape, right? So when that happens, our students, right, and I say our community, they're not being prepared to be entrepreneurs. They're not being prepared adequately to take the next step in looking at careers that are providing them an opportunity to take advantage of careers that are on the horizon. We're looking at careers of the past. Right, so how do you prepare these students? We need to make certain that our next wave of educators are able to instruct in, number one, the traditional model and a hybrid model and a virtual model. Our universities are still turning out educators in the traditional model to be able to present instruction in a traditional model. So that's going to go the way of the dodo bird.
So
right?
that's where it falls into Dr. Faheem's wheelhouse, because we are missing the African teaching ways. So we're not being taught who we are. So how can we, in this Western society, so many of our children, so many of our people have missed the education of who they are. So we're still being indoctrinated, if that's what you may say, in the Western world and how they want us to learn. Does that make sense, Dr. Faheem?
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because I would say the first thing that we have to do, and like the brother said, you know, we're living in a smaller world now. And when I say smaller, I mean globally. And the thing is, we're not connecting. We're not connecting. So our children is not going to connect globally. For years, I lived in Africa and I taught in Africa. And the system in Africa doesn't start with reading and writing. It starts with building character. That's the first thing. The first step is to build good character. If we can start with that, good character, and the thing in Africa with students is they're taught not to be independent thinkers until they get up into high school. They absorb the information. Their whole idea is you sit there and be quiet, I'm going to give you everything you need. And you're going to not only absorb it, but you're going to, by the time you get up to high school, you're going to take that information and you're going to actually use it in the town or village. You're not just going to get a diploma, but we're going to be able to see what you learn and apply to help all the people in that village. So that's a concept that we're missing because we don't have that spark, and that first spark is in the ancient Kemetic concept is creativity. Creativity is the first thing not to duplicate. There are people who duplicate what we do, but we are the creators. We are the ones with the creativity. And if we don't teach that first, then everything else that we do, we say, okay, we've done this and that. But how did it start? If we don't even know how it began in us, and that's an old African mystery. So we have to be able to teach those concepts of the ancient ones to our children, and for us to be able to see, wow, that's really who we are. So when you say know thyself,
right.
Know thyself is not just a phrase, a catchphrase, but it's an actual process.
And here's the
And in that process, for instance, young males, they are initiated.
Right. And I was gonna say, but prior to that process starts at the age of 0. And here's what I mean. For the first 5 years, the brain is developing to absorb. So in that household, if your household is broken emotionally, physically, spiritually, soulfully, all those connectors that it takes for the cognitive development at the age of more often 5 to 6 is when cognitive behavior comes in. Now you can explain to the child, this is why you don't touch the stove, right? But prior to then, it is all absorbing by the visual, by your senses, all senses. So I'm not going to go through it. It's very easy. All 5 senses is absorbing that education. It's everything. So we take a broken society, a broken household, a broken community. We're not even talking about economics. We're talking about it being broken emotionally, traumatized. By the time they get to kindergarten, they are already spiritually and soulfully blocked. So their creativity's out the window. So that is where we are as a community, as a large part of the community. Now, if every time I say about a community, I get people inboxing me saying, Dr. Paul, I'm not like that. I'm not talking to you. If you think I'm talking to you, if you're not like that, are you teaching the other? Because each one teach one. Because if you're not like that, then I hope you're helping your brother to the next door, or to the door in front of you, the door behind you. Or if you're just getting in your car and going to your job because you got yours, then we're still fractured. Robert, what do you think?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. When you talk about the brain just really observing so much information through behavior, right? And you think about who were the first teachers that that child observes.
Right.
It's the family. Oftentimes it's the mother, right? So it's the mother, it's the family, the extended family, and then the community. If they're operating in if we're oftentimes, too often, we're sending our young people out with just one side of it, right? Because they're going out, unfortunately, right now, observing one parent. They're not observing the interaction between two individuals. They're not, while they're doing a self-analysis and they're becoming aware of who they are, male or female, they're not seeing that interaction between male and female, or they're not seeing the modeling of behavior. If there's a male absent, they don't see the male behavior being modeled in front of them. So they're missing something going out, right? So then it's the communal values, right? What are they going out of the home with? What is that communal values? What do the community values look like? How do we take that to the classroom, right? And then have that reinforced. And then when that child becomes aware of who they are, instead of teaching from a deficit model, telling them what they're lacking coming in, we need to play to strengths at an early age. Have them explore more at that early age to tap into their talent and their strengths and their gifts.
So
now,
isn't that part of the African teaching? That's called, that's a negative being, right? We're supposed to be positive being. Africans teach to the positive being of self, right, Dr. Faheem?
That's right. That's right. And, what we have to understand is there's, when you go to different parts of Africa, people have different languages, they have different cultures, but the root is they teach the same character building concepts. That's all over Africa. Wherever you go, you'll see, if you observe long enough, you'll see that they're teaching the same things. And a lot of people will say, well, this started in Egypt. It started in Central Africa. Central Africans were the teachers of all people on the continent. So, when I was there, my thing was, I didn't go there trying to tell someone else what they should be doing. They are my teachers.
Right.
All I had to do was observe, and I learned so much just from observing, even more than I had read in books for years. Just the fact that I was there on the continent observing. So a lot of times we have to even step back and observe the children and see where are they at, so we can correct some of the things that we see, instead of always being the one who's commanding. We need to sit back and say, okay, I see what's happening here. Now we can fix that.
Now, isn't that part, if people don't know where education here in these United States come from, it's a European-centric taught way. There are different, it's almost tough to say this conversation between you two brothers and who people are listening, they may not get that this model here in these United States is a Europe-centric model. Now, Robert, can you help explain the difference somehow? Because if I do it, I think I'm going to jump over people's heads like a kangaroo, and I don't want to jump over people's heads because people are like, "Why go education's education?" No.
It is not. You hit the nail on the head. We are taught in Western civilization from a European model, right? And it's done purposefully. And to be honest with you, they're doing a great job at it.
Yeah.
They're doing a great job. The system isn't failing. The
No,
system
it's
doing
working.
exactly what it was designed to do.
Which is why we're mentally sick and mentally traumatized.
Exactly.
So it's working.
Exactly. So we talk about building the individual from a strength model, right? Having them learn through observation. Now we look at this model here, and it's truly working it's counterintuitive to what is provided, what's being given off spiritually at home, right? So let me just talk about the miseducation of individuals in our school system. Right now, there's a movement, there's an open movement right now to prevent accurate historical information being presented in the classroom, right? So right now they want to continue to provide fallacies in history. We need to say, no, it can't happen anymore. We need to stop teaching his story and make sure that we embed our story in the curriculum.
Now,
How does that happen?
this is not a pushback, and I, as people know, I'm a love of people. So I almost have to put a disclaimer like smoking cigarettes. White people can't teach our story.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I don't care how much we teach them our story. Is it possible? Could they teach our story?
They number
That's
one,
a tough one, isn't it?
It is tough, right? I don't believe that you have to have had walked in someone else's shoes to get them to where they need to go. But I do believe, right, you have to have a certain level of experiences or have a reference to where that starting point was, right, to clearly understand what they're going through at the time, what the triggers are, the trauma right now, because we have to peel back the layers of trauma to begin with.
Right.
That has to happen. Without that happening in the school system, education is always going to fail, right? We have to peel back those layers.
Dr. Faheem, is it possible for?
Well, there's so many layers to what we're seeing right now. I mean, you know, mom gets up, she got 2 jobs, she's going to work, she's barely making it, you know, nobody's home with her son. And I mean, what is he to do? That's one thing he has to deal with. Education, that's not in the forefront for him. So we have to be able to get to the point where, like the tribes in Africa, we become one family. We become successful as individuals, but we're terrible as a group. We're terrible as a people.
Oh, we're horrible. If we looked at ourselves as a country, here's the funny thing. We talk about segregation. If we're segregated from the white people, then we are our own country. And if we looked at ourselves as our own country, we are fractioned as a people. We have no source. The only source we have is a workforce. We sell ourselves as a workforce. That's the only product we seem to have that we sell collectively.
Exactly. And you know, the thing about that is, like you said earlier about mental health, when we don't have a collective education, if we don't have a concept that is just for us, you're going to see it your way, I'm going to see it my way, one person's going to see it their way. But when you look at other races, even if they come from China or wherever, they will land in San Francisco and they keep on running just like they were wherever they came from. Because of that basis is the education, but the education is just not in books. There were people who came here from different countries. They jumped in the education system. And the thing is, that wasn't the thing that they were proud of. They weren't proud of getting that degree. They were like, well, I've beat them in their own game.
Right, that's it.
So now I can bring that education, which equals money. And now, if you look at Chinese and other races, you don't see them in corporate America a lot unless they were American born. You see them building their own communities. They're using the education first that they got at home. And then they use it and they say, well, you know, we gotta look like they look, we gotta speak like they speak. So they go to classes and they learn the language and they do all these things and they come back and they use it for themselves.
Now, we call, throughout the world, there's a unified word called consciousness. It is developed from the universal balance. You have spiritual consciousness, you have family consciousness, and you have what you call your community of consciousness. Robert, we do not have a Black conscious. And it makes me throw up because we're not fighting people for understanding. And here, even when we have this program, people have a lack of consciousness. So how do we get past that, Robert? I just pushed it back on you. Wait, Robert.
I took a deep breath because I'm going to go back to a simple term, a simple phrase, right? A word called community. But when you think about community, you cannot spell community without what the root word unity.
Unity.
Right? And we have, unfortunately, we've lost our culture and our values, right? And it's pushed us away from unifying. Even W.E.B. Du Bois talked about the talented 10, right? Phenomenal concept. And it actually existed. But what happened was we had that flight, that talented 10 left the neighborhood. It left the community. That talent drain, that drain, the pool was being drained every day because we wanted to integrate and be like others instead of what Dr. Judah just indicated. Say, you know what? I'm going to use yours. I'm going to perfect the things in your system, right? Excel at that, and then bring it back to my community or keep it within my community. The self-consciousness starts with self-awareness, right? It starts with the moral conviction in the home and within that community to understand who you are as a people, who you are as an individual.
Dr. Right? Dr. Wade Noble said that the Black community suffers from a lack of Black consciousness and a fractured identity. That's paraphrasing. So is that it?
We tend not to value things unless it's validated by someone else, someone outside of our community. Even when we start things, and I don't want to say there aren't enough of us. There aren't enough individuals that are comfortable and confident with who they are because we're being misguided and misdirected and reprogrammed every day. We've been socially conditioned to devalue, to marginalize ourselves.
But that's
unfortunate. Let me just get this one phrase out, brother. Unfortunately, and I hope I don't get you in trouble with the show. But
no, you won't.
Unfortunately, there are members in the Black community that are the biggest white supremacists in the country.
Wait a minute, say it again. Say it black and say it proud. You gotta say it a little louder.
Unfortunately, there are members within our community that are some of the biggest white supremacists in the country. Not because they're teaching that white is better, but they're marginalizing, right, ourselves, our individuals, our youth, right? So and they're devaluing the value that we bring, right? And anything that we do well, right? It's marginalized. So we're being socially conditioned every day with this.
What I was going to say is, Dr. Faheem, that's that Eurocentric model that is working, right?
It's working. It's been working. But we have to go back and we have to understand that when we start talking about Europe and European knowledge, it started in ancient Kemet. That knowledge started in ancient Kemet, and we can track it from Andalusia. We can track it from the Almohades, the Moors in Spain, in Andalusia, in Europe. There was a time where Europeans in Europe, in Spain, they counted on the Moors to teach them how to bathe. The first universities of Seville were built by the Moors. That's right. Yeah. So we have a history of great knowledge, but like the brother said, we've been knocked in the head. We forgot who we are, and someone is perpetually knocking us down generation after generation. As soon as we get a good foothold, a good start, here comes something else. So we have to be guardians of that. We have to, like you said, we have to stop marginalizing who we are. We've come from a great, great people. So far back that there is no record of who we really are. That's how great we are as a people. But in the condition we are mentally, it takes us to go back to say, who am I? Where did I come from? There's a story in ancient Kemet about a deity, and his name is Atum. Atum, in the spiritual concept of ancient Kemet, he is the first one who self-realized.
Mo. Yeah.
So, so the whole world has taken that. In science, he's called Adam.
Mm-hmm.
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 In Christian religion, he's called Adam. But the real ancient concept of self-realization comes from Atum. I know that's maybe a little deep for some people.
No, it isn't, because
No,
it's not, because when you start talking about the Atum, when you start going into the atom, you get into my chemistry, you get into the biochem, you start getting into the genetic level of who we really are. And that's why every time we get blocked off with this Eurocentric model, it stops the vibrational code of our cellular development, which blocks us from actually healing ourselves from the traumatic wounds that is placed upon on this Western society. It all fits to me.
Let me add this, Dr. Faheem and Dr. Paul, Dr. Dyer. Dr. Faheem, I can tell you this, as a former principal and educator, right? You say that those things, they get lost. I guarantee you, right? And I've observed this, and it happens to me all the time. You can walk into any classroom in the US, where there are African students, African-American students, Black students, however we want to define them. When you connect the dots and you take it back to that level, they will sit down and hang on every word that you say from there on. Because what you just mentioned, Dr. Dyer, that spiritual connection, right? That vibe, and I'm doing the air quotes, right? Mm-hmm. It happens, brother. It happens. They said something happens where they say, oh, there's a connection there, right? And that's why, right, you don't have strong males in education anymore. They try to weed us out, right? Because they know you can walk into a classroom and it's not the physical discipline, it's that mental discipline, right? That mental connection that you will have, in particular with young boys and young ladies, because they're looking for what? A warrior spirit. They're looking for an intellect. They're looking for a protector. They're looking for someone that does what? That's going to lead the community. And they see that in you when you walk into the classroom. That's the image that's being destroyed. That's why you have so much buffoonery, so much talent, so many comics and entertainers. And I'm not knocking the trade, right? Because that is a skill set in itself, right? But we pay too much attention to that, and young people are being misguided, and that's that miseducation daily. They're being reprogrammed every day to chase that.
I got a question for you, and you brought it up. Since you brought it up, like you said, I don't get in trouble because this is my show, and I've been with iHeartRadio for, I don't know, four plus years. I actually think that buffoonery was a slave tactic to not get beaten. If I could sing and dance and make you laugh, then I cannot be beaten by the captor. So, so that was promoted by the white people for you to enhance your comic value, your singing prowess, and that's what we'll promote for your community. Outside of that, you could be hung, slapped, raped, and killed. Do people ever see that connection at all?
That's a great analogy because, I mean, that's the way it was. It was survival.
Mm-hmm.
It was a way for people to survive, especially Black males. It was a way for them, you know, I don't want master to get mad at me. So he started jigging and dancing and so on. But you have to understand, being in that position, that's all you had. That's all you had. And the thing is, we're not in that position physically, but we're definitely in that position right now mentally, where we do the same things, and sometimes it's unconscious.
That's and you're making my point. And so I'm doing this. I do mental health to awaken. We can heal ourselves, whether it be alcoholism, whether it be any addiction. We can heal it, but I got to get you to understand how your cells work, how your body works, how your chemistry works. Because until you understand how you are, your identity, you will always remain sick, right? So just like Robert Johnson said, if we don't have that consciousness of knowing who you are, you're going to always be misguided and misled and mistaught. And that miseducation is always going to constantly work on you. And it's not so much you using it to understand them, but they're using it to define you and to confine you. You know what I mean? So there's a difference to that.
Yeah.
And the difference, what Dr. Faheem had indicated, you know, there was survival mode, right, at that point, because it was dangerous to be seen as what? The strong Black male, right? The intellectual Black male.
Or the strong one.
Or the strong one, right? So that was the survival mode. You had to be docile or funny. Right now it happens in the neighborhoods, right? Either you're the individual that knows how to fight, you're the one that dresses well, you're the one that has a strong rap game, I did air quotes again, or you're the what? You're the comedian, right? Or the athlete. Those are 5 things in the neighborhood, right? Or unfortunately, you're engaging in some deviant behavior. Those are 6, right? 6 areas for our young men. So you're doing one of those 6 things to fit in, right? Notice I didn't say the intellect.
Right.
The intellect is the outcast.
Or the sensitive one.
Or the sensitive one. Exactly. How dare you respect our women? How dare you respect the families? How dare you respect relationships? Right? That's seen as weakness, unfortunately. Right? That's because that's portrayed as weakness. Right? Once we, again, it's redefining or connecting with our values and our morals. They didn't go away overnight. It happened over time. Right? So when we were after we were freed, right? What happened? Everyone they dispersed. They were in a rush to get away from that plantation, right? And they moved north, moved west, right? But Brother Malcolm said it best: you're south of Canada, you're in the South, right? You're still in the South. That mindset was still there.
Right.
That's why family reunions were so important, because you needed to reconnect with families, right? Slaves, that families that were broken up during that period, during this enslavement, pardon me, you know, they wanted to reconnect. So right now, the values, we need to reestablish values, and that value system starts with our Black family, right? Led by our Black males to protecting that community, right? And it's not to say that our women aren't part of that. It's just that they're different roles,
Yes.
right? They're different roles, and they're both equally respected and needed, right? But we have to become aware of who we are. We have to protect one another, and we have to teach one another. Let me finish with this, Brother Dyer. So we just finished, today's the last day of Black History Month.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
People ask me, how do I feel about it, right? Obviously, there's some pride in seeing individuals talk about and recognize some Black leaders, some Black greatness, Black excellence. Right?
Tomorrow it's over.
But tomorrow it's over. And there's pain in Black history as well.
Yes.
Right? And the pain is because we know that there was so much talent pulled from Africa, right? The strongest of us made it across that Middle Passage, right? The strongest of us right? Mentally survive. And they had to do whatever it took to survive, right? And then to now say, to watch the same game plan be played over and over and over again. Dr. Faheem said every time we take a step forward, right, they reintroduce a new concept, but it's the same game plan. So I say to myself, we're teaching history, but we're not learning from it because it repeats itself, right? They put different individuals in different positions, right? They continue to marginalize our community. They continue we continue to want to integrate, right? Instead of saying, hey, let's do for self, let's become more self-aware of who we are, let's take control of our communities, right? So this game plan is happening over and over and over again. That's the pain from Black history. And I need to say, let's stop teaching history completely, his story completely, right? You can teach it, but we need to learn our story. We need to learn our story before we start really teaching and becoming proficient in his story. We need to become advanced in our story.
So, Dr. Faheem, when it comes to education and the mental trauma and teaching our story, like Robert says, does that mean if you don't know your story, can you participate in Black consciousness? Is it possible?
Well, I would say no.
Me too. I asked the question not to be redundant because I want people to say, if you think if you participating in the movement of movement, meaning move forward, whether it be economics, intelligence, whatever it is, if you're not moving forward, you probably don't know your story. You probably don't know the story, and you probably don't know our story.
Well, as far as what I do, I write books. That's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. Besides teaching.
You gotta tell people how many books you've written.
Well, I've written over 100 books.
There it is.
On various subjects. A lot of people probably can't even pronounce. But the thing is, those people who are seeking consciousness, they will find exactly what they need if they seek it. That's the point that we have to make. You can't be complacent. We have to be thinkers. We have to be seekers. We have to seek out our own knowledge.
And I want to interject this real quick. And I don't want people to miss this model. To seek, you will find, but you cannot seek if you're worried about cleaning your car, buying a new car, buying a new watch, looking fly or fire, or whatever the hell those new terms are. If you're still looking for that, you will never find it.
That's right. I mean, I write a series of mathematic books for children. And in this series of books, it starts from, it doesn't really start from first grade because I don't believe in those concepts of first, second grade, because our children's minds can absorb so much information. So I take it from 0 up to about what they call third grade. And what I found with parents who write me about the books, they say, this is unbelievable. My daughter can barely talk, but she knows math. And I'm saying, she knows a lot more than that. But you got to get out of that. What people taught you, don't teach it to her. Because what you're doing is you're stifling her creativity. You're stifling that God-given gift that we have. So in the books that I write, they're not just math books, but they have the stories of Africa in the books. What that does for me, that gives me a chance to teach the mathematics, but also teach the origin of the mathematics. Because if you took the word algebra, you'll see that the word algebra is 3 deities in ancient Kemet.
Yep.
Even if I said to you, Genesis,
Come on,
You
brother.
realize that this is the generations of ISIS.
Yes.
So these concepts have been given to us generation after generation, but hidden within the language. When you take the word sunset, sunset is talking about the deity Ra and the deity Set.
Thank you. Come on now.
So these are the things that are hidden right in front of us when we say horizon.
Yeah.
Rising. It's in our everyday language. And I told her brother, he said, we were talking about a subject and he said, hip, hip, hooray. And people said, what does that have to do? I said, if you understood those three deities in ancient Kemet that the Marines use and the football teams and all these organizations use, you'll understand that they're doing nothing but mimicking your old phrases from Africa.
That's it.
That's it.
They have colonized our own spirituality, used it against us. That, you know, as evil people go, that's some crazy, wild shit. That, I mean, that is, come on, to sit in a room and go like this, you know what? That's some beautiful stuff, but we know we can use it against them. That's a wild shit, man. I'm telling you, that's beautiful. As evil people go, well, wow. Just think of like Metropolis. Come on now. What do you think the first Metropolis was? Robert,
and you can't have a mic drop moment right in the middle of your show.
No. Before we get going, and we only got 15 minutes. This goes really fast. Robert, I want you to talk about what we have coming up as far as that community meeting, and I want you to add on that we're in this time of change. And what I mean by that, since, like I said, since 45, since the Black education community got together and said, we need to take over and be part of ourselves. We've had, in the early 50s, we had Indonesia take themselves back. We have the Congo take themselves back. We have Nigeria, they took themselves back. We had a lot of people say, you know what, we're not doing this no more. We're not taking this no more. We're not being your slave no more. But here in the United States, we don't have a Black consciousness and we don't have unity. And I know here in Maryland, where Robert and I are, we're trying to build that and make it happen. Robert, talk about that.
Absolutely. So the concept that Dr. Dyer is talking about, what we will provide in the state of Maryland, and this will happen in June, is a crisis in Black America, right? In the Black community, right? A community moving forward together. What we want to do is to have a 2-day conference modeled after the Gary Conference in Indiana in 1972, literally 50 years ago, right? Where we bring forth individuals, no matter who they are, that are from within the Black diaspora. And we're going to bring individuals together to identify challenges and issues within our community. Not only identify them, but to formulate a strategic plan that each one of those individual entities will take back to their community throughout the state and implement that strategic plan, right? Don't veer from it at all. We're talking about elected officials, nonprofits, clergy, business leaders, community outreach, community leaders, grassroots planners, people from different religious backgrounds and faiths, right? We want everyone, you can have a different perspective, right? But the love that you must have is for our community, right? So there's going to be a finish line. People may have a different pathway to the finish line, but the pathway, you have to get there and bring others with you. So we want to have that conference to really shape, right, the next generation of leaders in the United States, right, in our communities. But we have to build what? we have to, instead of the school to prison pipeline, we need to build a leadership pipeline, right? How do we do that, right? So in 3 areas, if we can come out of this with a legislative agenda, with an economic agenda, and an education agenda, I believe it will take care of these social justice issues, right? But some people may say, hey, you know, let's have a social and criminal justice agenda as well. That's fine if that's the add-on. But I think we really need to address, and the communications agenda, actually, because we need to control our narratives in our communities. So how do we make sure that we do that and reinvest in our communities? And we can't formulate this plan and then ask other individuals for resources to support it, right? That's hustling backwards. So we need to be able to strategically sit down, work together. That's the unity in the word community, to unify, to identify our challenges and issues, but also our strengths, right? Work towards our strengths, eliminating some of these challenges and issues. And it won't happen overnight, but I believe we can put together a blueprint, a strategic plan, and come out of there with an agenda in 3 to 4 areas, and say, you know what, let's move forward with this together, and then see where it takes us.
Dr. Faheem, I'm going to have you back on the show, so don't worry about that. But I'm going to ask you an opposing question to what we're talking about, what we're all talking about. What will stop a person of Black and brown to not understand that unifying and knowing thyself is what needs to happen before they move forward?
Well, first of all, we're plagued morally with selfishness.
That hurts. That's sad.
Selfishness has plagued us, especially this generation. And I have to put a lot of this on. A lot of our entertainers have to understand that you are exuding selfishness with your materialism, the way you carry yourself. And it's impossible for a young child. I remember back in the day when I was a kid, I see a drug dealer on the corner, finds fancy clothes and shoes. Of course I'm looking up to him. That's all I see. But now kids can see it on television. They can see our entertainers looking the same way. Not all of them, but the majority of them. So we have to understand that.
And proselytizing our women.
Exactly. We have to understand that, you know, small actions, small things that we do, it makes a big influence on our children. So for a young African American, as they might say, or Latino young man, what do they have to really look up to? They don't have very much to look up to in their surroundings. But here's the thing. As parents, as community leaders, we have to be in a position where we're not saying, oh, that's for young folks, that's for, you know, young people do this, they need to take over. As long as you got a breath in your body, you need to be out there teaching somebody young something. Mm-hmm. Now, when I grew up, me in my neighborhood, whatever trade they had, if a man in my neighborhood worked on cars, his garage was the repair shop.
Yeah.
Everybody went to his garage. People cut hair in the basement. They did whatever they had to, and they were talented at it. Mm-hmm. So we need that hands-on mentorship. Mm-hmm. Not just when we get up and go to school, but we need kids to just observe it, to be able to see, Dad knows how to do this. Uncle knows how to do this. Now we got the narrative, oh, Uncle don't know what he's doing. He's just a bum on the street. He don't do nothing but lay around and drink. That has to stop.
You're right. When I grew up, I got a lot of, come here, little man, help me with this.
That's right. Now, I went to school under the Nation of Islam, and it was very strict. So for me, during that time, I didn't understand anything about public school because my uncle was a security guard for Malcolm. So I didn't know anything about that. We were taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So in that, we need to take away from the things that we've done good, that we've seen in life, in our history, and we need to say, okay, that's something I can use. Maybe not everything.
Right.
You can't use everything because you're living in a society now that's moving forward at a rate that is hard to keep up with. But it's those good moral things that we need to hold on to. We got to hold on to those values.
Robert,
And I don't mean religion.
no, there's a difference.
There's a difference.
Robert,
You keep whatever religion you have as long as the religion teaches good moral value.
Absolutely.
Robert,
Building up men and community, right? Whether you agree with the religious
or not.
religion or not, if you just take it at face value, right?
Yeah.
What is wrong with what? There's nothing wrong with it. Why, as a woman, why wouldn't you want a man that's grounded in faith?
Hello.
A man that's saying, okay, I want to elevate your position so high that no one will even think about disrespecting you.
Not
Right.
one person, not even
Not
one.
one.
Right.
Not one. They don't mutter a word against a woman, a female that's dressed that they know is in the with the NOI.
You know, in the Nation of Islam, we had a phrase among higher ranking members, and we said there was the first resurrection and the second resurrection. A lot of people thought that the religion was important in the first resurrection, but it wasn't. It was the distance. It was the teaching men to be men, women to be women. We knew the spiritual concept was flawed. We knew that because Donald Elijah Muhammad was taking it off the Jesus story, but he was just saying, "Look, you be the God. Don't let the white man be the God." He said, "If you stick with me long enough and I raise you up, then the second generation, I will teach you the religion."
That's right.
And then Malcolm got a little bit ahead of himself, but he went to Mecca and came back and said, "Hold on, there's Muslims of all different religions and different races."
Well, you know, when he went to Mecca, what was that? 58?
Yeah, about 58.
Okay, so what happened around? Remember, I just mentioned earlier, the 50s had a lot. We had Cuba, 59, right?
Right.
Castro came down from the mountains and said, "Okay, all you Russian gangsters, you better get the hell out of my country. I'm kicking your ass," right? So
Right.
you had Sudan, 56.
Right.
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of people there like, okay, we're done. You know, the Congo, who had the Congo? Starts with a B. The Belgians. The Belgians.
King Leopold.
Right. They kicked the Congo out, and the Congo's got more minerals. Listen to me. Most people don't know this. The Congo's got more minerals. They got cobalt. It's the richest land in all of the world.
Right.
You know, and most people don't even know that the African continents were divided up by people in Germany.
Right.
There was a white people in Germany going, you know what? You take the Congo and you take, they split that up and they went and just fractured it.
That's right. That's right. And how Leopold was such a ruthless man that he would cut off your right hand and your left foot. That's how ruthless he was.
Yeah. You know, and we had Egypt. They got their independence in the 50s again, 51, 52.
Right.
So the 50s, that black consciousness was like, okay, we're done. We're not having it anymore. And I think that's what we're trying to bring back. That's what we need to bring back. If we don't bring it back, we are heading towards a second enslavement and captivity. And it has it's sad, but it's so true. Yeah. So you brothers have a good night. I gotta jump on a phone call, Mr. Johnson, right after this, because we gotta work on a letter to bring black people to say, if you don't come, shame on you. It maybe be a little bit, I like to be a little stronger than that, but Robert's a little bit more better speaker than I am. Because I'm serious. I mean, Dr. Faheem, we got black people that say, I don't need to go to that. Really? Wow. What makes you, I would love to sit in the living room, have some tea, coffee, and say, why don't you think you need to show up to this?
Right. Wow.
I'm curious. Teach me. Right?
Yeah.
Because I need to know. I'm not going to convince you, but I need to know where you at.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Dr. Faheem, can you put can I get your contact information? I can just write it down if you don't mind.
Yes, sir, brother.
While you guys are talking offline, thank everyone for listening to Bridges Live, talking about mental health and education. Thank you. You guys continue to talk.